I love the story of Moses. He's the most unbelievable human being. He was called in the desert by God in a burning bush and given the most terrifying job: go to Egypt and free the Israelites. He was given the most awesome abilities to change the weather. He brought to earth some of the most tremendous physical natural problems for the Egyptians, and he bargained with Pharaoh for their release. And to hasten their escape, he used God's power to split the ocean in order for them to escape sure tragedy. Then he actually met with and talked with God on the top of a mountain. Now he was leading the Israelites home, but soon found the task was bigger than himself. He was tired and worn out, and along comes some friendly advice from someone in his past. Today's lesson is all about a man named Jethro. Now, I know the first thought that came to your mind when I said the word Jethro was probably one or the other of these two men, right? Jethro Tull came to your mind. If it did, I'm surprised, but you know. This is not Jethro Tull, that's just the name the group took, but at any rate, it's Ian Anderson. He's the guy that plays the flute in all of their music, so I'm sure you've heard him before. And then the other Jethro, of course, would be the one that I was more familiar with all of my life, and that would be Jethro Bodine. And so you say Jethro, he's the first thing I think about. But maybe we'll start thinking about another Jethro after this lesson today. The Jethro that I'm referencing was a Midianite who lived in the area east of the Gulf of Aqaba in the Red Sea. The Bible said he had heard about Moses' triumph. Now, it would have been in excess of 400 or so miles from where he lived to where they were in Egypt, and probably more than that. How in the world did Jethro hear of Moses' exploits and the group that was headed his way without email, telephones, iPhones, Twitter, online news, satellites, and a mail system? The best that he had was Camel Caravan walkie-talkie. So unfortunately, we can't say for certain where they were when he came, but at any rate, we know that he did come to meet them, and he left his area and traveled over probably where Sinai is and met with them there. Now, I prefer to believe that there are three locations, and I like the one that's lower down between the V in those two gulfs, and I like that one to be Mount Sinai, but none of us know for certain.
There was a good guy in that at night the heavens are really bright, the stars, you know anything about them and the directions, just as you know other light. Really dark. That's true.
Unless they had headlights on their camels, I don't know. Well, we just don't know, but at any rate, Jethro did come to visit them. Now, Jethro was a Midianite. What does that mean? Well, Midian was obviously a son of Abraham. Unfortunately, Midian was not a son of Abraham through Sarah. He was a son of Abraham through Keturah. And that made him a little bit to his cousins and the people who would have considered him a brother, made him a little bit less than family. And they despised him, actually. Moses was the Jew of all Jews, though, of the tribe of Levi. The descendants of Midian were hated from the beginning by the Jews. When Abraham died, the odd Ishmael was there at the funeral, but not Midian. And the Bible's pronouncement that the family of Ishmael would be forever enemies of the Israelites did come true, but no promise was made of this sort about the family of Midian. However, later on, we're going to read a story where in Numbers 31, God commands Israel to return to Midian and completely destroy them utterly. Men, women, children, animals, leave nothing, a scorched earth policy of any kind. Moses was given this command later to initiate an ethnic cleansing of Midian. Now, how must he felt? Because he spent 40 years or more with them. Jethro, his beloved mentor, was one of them. How must Moses have felt when God gave him that command? Sometimes God gives us things, puts it on our heart to do things we don't want to do, but we do them anyway for love of him. Before he came to Egypt, Moses married Jethro's daughter, Zipporah, and they had 2 sons. Jethro required Moses to work for Zipporah, a period that lasted 40 years. Now, I love my wife. I really do. had I known I had to work all the rest of my life for her instead of just 40 years, then I might have thought otherwise. But nonetheless, we do love each other. They're Moses, and I do love you, by the way, just so you know. Moses and Zipporah had two sons, Gershom and Eleazar. Jethro was a Midianite priest who's considered the father of what today is known as the Druze. D-R-U-Z-E. Have you ever heard of them? That's because we live over here, they live over there. And they're a very, very, very tiny, they're not a minority at all, very, very tiny little group of people, a sect over there. I'll show you a picture in just a few minutes of some of them. Now, the Druze religion is eclectic. In other words, it takes principles from Ismaili, which is a sect of Muslimism, Christianity, Gnosticism, Neapolitanism, Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, Hinduism, with a lot of Pythagoras. I couldn't figure that one out. Angles and so forth. But anyway, a lot of Pythagoras thrown in, basically meaning a lot of Greek thought, because he was a Grecian. He is the father of the Druze religion that's very active in Palestine even today. He's venerated and loved by the Midianite descendants. Now, my mom and dad had 5 children, right? So I got in trouble. I was always called Carmen, Julie, Rita, Butch. You know, it took her forever to get my name out because he had so many of them. I thought my parents just couldn't remember my name, really. Surely a man with 8 names would be easy to remember. Jethro had 8 names. Surely one of them would stick in your head, but maybe not. Have you ever come to a party or a church and there's somebody there that you don't know? You may have known them, but you can't remember their name. How embarrassing, right? So you do the pretend I don't know your name, but act like I do game, right? That's a game you play. Hoping you'll never have to call them by name. Hi, how are you doing? Been a long time. Great to see you. Oh, you look so good today. And you never mention their name at all. Hopefully they won't ask you, do you remember my name? So I have something that's a really cool and clever trick for you. This is not biblical at all, but it's in here nonetheless. If you can't come up with someone's name, go ahead and say, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. And they will oblige with what? What will they tell you? The first name, right? They gave you the answer that you wanted. Well, immediately say, no, I meant your last name. See, they will never know. I'm serious, it's a great trick. Politicians use it all the time. They'll never know you didn't know their name. We know the descendants of Jethro today, they're known as the Druze, D-R-U-Z-E. For most, being a Druze is their cultural identity. It's a whole lot less their religious identity. Religiously, they're not anything. They're probably like a whole lot of people in this world, in this country over here today. A whole lot of nothing. But at any rate, they do show up. Anytime there's a huge gathering of people, you're going to see the Druze there. You might not have even noticed. I'll show you a way to pick them out. They have a temple that they use for worship even today. It's in a city called Hattin in the northern Palestine, and they worship the Jethro of the mosque of Jethro there. And the image looks into the inner court, into their temple. Beautiful, isn't it? On specific holy days every year, the city of Jerusalem is crowded with Orthodox and non-Orthodox Jewish men, and they're all wearing suits and some kind of a hat. Every man will have some kind of a hat on his head. It could be a traditional fedora, like you see in the upper left-hand corner there. They call these hats kippah. And those hats, on average, cost between $50 and $500. Then they all wear a yarmulke. Most of them will have a yarmulke on with the hat on top of it, just so you know. The yarmulke is very important to them. But some people who are very fortunate and earn a lot of money, and they are Hasidic, meaning Orthodox Jewish men, they wear a round cylinder of a hat that looks very much like a fuzzy fur cake. It's precisely made of sable and marten hair, and it is expensive. When you see one of those, they've shucked out a lot of money, as much as $7,000 for one of these hats. They don't come easy. You can't pick them up at any Walmart over there. the best ones are just perfect and smooth, and they look like they look perfect. And like this one is not very perfect from the pictures that I've seen. Anytime there's a huge group gathered of Jews in Jerusalem for any reason, you'll see a whole bunch of those black hats there. But you'll also see a few white hats. Brimless white hats or white turbans. Typically, those are going to be the Druze. So the next time you see on TV a gathering of people in Jerusalem, look and see. You'll see some white hats there, and you'll know that these are descendants, or they worship a descendant of Midian. They worship in the Druze religion. So when the tribe moved close to Mount Sinai, Jethro brought Moses' family to him, and that included Zipporah, Gershom, and Eleazar. Now Moses respected his father-in-law, and he even bowed down to him in obedience to show respect and honor for him. He had worked for him for about 40 years earlier in his life before meeting God in a burning bush, and he was told to bring the Jews out of Egypt. Zipporah and Moses there are reunited shortly after the events that occurred up on Mount Sinai, the ones that we've talked about so far. Now the boys had never known their father, Moses. He left them in Jethro's care. Jethro came and brought a burnt offering to the Jews' God, along with other sacrifices. And I can imagine Moses' delight at seeing his previous mentor and his sage, and all the elders came out to greet Jethro, and the entire group ate a meal in the presence of God, the Bible says. Moses told his father-in-law all of the things, of course, that had been done, the trip out of Egypt, the travel that they had taken to get to where they were. I'm sure he would have told them about the opening of the Dead Sea and the crossing, about meeting God on the mountain to receive the Ten Commandments, and all of the events leading up to that day. And Jethro would provide some very sage advice to Moses after he had watched him do his daily job. The Bible says Jethro observed Moses. He stepped back, crossed his arms, didn't say a word. All he did was watch what Moses was doing. And this is what Jethro saw. Every day, from morning to night, Moses conducted the duties as a judge over the people. All day long, he would sit and he would listen to complaint after complaint. He would make a decision, people would leave, then they'd bring somebody else in front of him. And that was the way he spent his entire day, from morning till bedtime. You can imagine with 1 million or more people, this burden was pretty great. You can imagine that it took a significant toll on Moses. And it was doubtlessly a frustration for the Israelites, because they, anytime they had any kind of arbitration, would need to go talk to the big man, Moses. They would have to wait all day before they could see Moses. They weren't happy with this situation either. Jethro observed all of this. They observed how he was the single arbiter for all decisions, and he was very quiet about it. Later, he got Moses aside, and he said, "Why in the world are you subjecting yourself and the Israelites to this? You're tired listening to disputes and setting them up. You don't have any time left for anything else." Jethro had in mind a legal system that's a little bit more appropriate for Moses than what Moses was doing as the single judge. Well, Moses obviously had a response. He said, "What else can I do? The people have issues, and I need someone to tell them how to settle their disputes. That's what I'm supposed to do, isn't it? I'm the leader of these people." Jethro probably then gave Moses the best advice for this situation, something Moses had never considered doing and something he desperately needed. He was probably worn out, tired, frustrated, had come to this. He needed the advice that Jethro made, and it would benefit himself and all of the people. In a sense, Jethro helped Moses put in place the exact same judiciary system that we have in our country. It started about 1789, and it still exists in almost exactly the same form as the original people intended, and it hasn't changed very much over that period of time. It was one of the first things that President George Washington put in place. Today, the Supreme Court rules over district and circuit courts all over the nation. The original plan put in place by Washington stood the test of time. It's lasted without change until our country spread out over the entire 50 states. It's surprising how closely today's federal court system resembles the one that was created in the Continental Congress way back all those years ago in 17-something. And this is how it looked. It's exactly what he told Moses to do. We have a Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court hears only a minute number of cases that exist in our docket system. There are other courts below them that filter out what's going to come up to them. And that's exactly what Jethro told Moses to do. He told him to put in place a Supreme Court, find people below them to handle a fewer number of cases, and people below them to handle cases. Then you'll only have to deal with 10 disputes a day, 5 disputes a day. There will be disputes that can be handled by other people other than you. You need a Supreme Court system. And that's exactly what Moses put in place. It looks something like this. People at a lower level, at a local trial court, they would bring their problems there, and for the most part, everything that they needed could be resolved there. Some things would bubble up. It would go to a district court of appeals. If those things weren't handled there, then it would go to the Supreme Court. Moses put this process in place, and it looks exactly like our judiciary system today. Jethro then left Moses after that policy was implemented, and clearly it was more than happenstance that Jethro came to see Moses exactly when Moses needed it the most. God must have directed him to come. After Moses put these changes in place, then Jethro departed and went back to his own home. Now, what lessons can we learn from the story of Moses and Jethro? Well, first I would tell you that everybody needs a trusted personal advisor. I have them, and hopefully you have them. Someone that you can go to and just explain everything in minute detail if you need to, but they will listen to you and they will help you decide, in some cases, all that you need to know to solve that problem. We also not only need an advisor. If you don't have one, you need to get one, but we also need just to take a step back and try to see from your perspective through the eyes of your children or their children, the eyes of the people who are oppressing you for whatever reason. Look at what they're feeling and thinking in this situation. And don't try to make all the decisions for your own family. If you have a family and you are looked at as the main patriarch or matriarch, that may not be good for you, just like it wasn't good for Moses. And it may not be good for your family as well. Everybody needs this. They need a personal advisor. Pick at least one person to be someone that you can lean on. You probably already do this by nature. Someone whose opinions matter to you. Husbands and wives both need a personal advisor. And your personal advisor should probably not be your mom and dad. It probably shouldn't be your daughter or your son. It probably should be somebody outside of your family unit that could even look at you and say how strange and kooky you people are. Let me tell you what you should do and give you some ideas about how to get yourself out of whatever situation that you're in. We have 7 grandchildren. Some of them seem to have few friends, and I hate that so bad for them. But a few of them seem to have an army of friends that come around them. And I believe the ones with more friends are going to have it better in life. I really do. I think you also need to take a step back. And Moses thought that Jethro told Moses that he needed to take a step back. Often we spend a lot more time feeling bad about a situation and not spend time finding a solution, right? We spend time wallowing in our misery. We're given situations that require us to grow a bit and situations we're not prepared for. And we all need a trusted friend whose advice is often better than your own course that you were planning. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And you, think about this, could be a trusted advisor to your friends as well. Someone who looks up to you. The second thing you need to think about is you may not always be a good judge or jury for everybody, though. Sometimes you have to let go and let your children do what they're going to do, even let them make mistakes and fail. Back off and let them deal with their own problems sometimes is the answer. Rushing in is probably seldom the right answer in those conditions. The first lesson is this, though. Failure is often a good thing. failure is not a bad thing necessarily. Failure is a good thing. I know that I have learned much more from those times that I tried something and it didn't work for me than I have from those things where I tried something and it worked. It was great. I learned so much from failure. That's often a good result. It's hard to see it when you're in it, but you look back on it and you think about it. The second thing you can do, ask in every decision, is it possible for me to delegate this decision down? Do I have to make this decision, or can I put it on the children to make that decision, for instance? Could somebody below you make that call? If you think it's possible to do that, then you could say things like, well, I have my opinions, but I think you have your own, so why don't you go with your own opinions about this? But it's a consciously made decision. It's not abdicating your responsibility. You cannot give up the throne all of the time. I know that. There's a tradition that says that a frog will sit in hot water until it's too hot for him and eventually die. You know what? There's not an ounce of truth in that at all. A frog will sit there until the water gets too hot, and what does he do? He tries to find his way to get out of that water. He won't boil himself to death. I promise you that. And we're the same way. We seem to enjoy the steam bath we're in at times, and we fail to see when the water has become too hot. Moses couldn't see that. The water was getting too hot for him. He was a very tired and worn out person, a husk of a man, an empty soul. He just accepted a bit too much of himself. So don't sit in hot water that's too hot for long. Get out. The website youarebeyondenough.com is a great website. Even if you don't really struggle with this, it's a good site to look at. It offers some suggestions that could have helped Moses and probably would help you if you are there. How do you know if you are beyond enough? Sometimes you may decide you just have to walk away. You can stay in a fight for longer than it's good for you or others. Now, that's hard advice to give somebody, but sometimes you may just have to walk away. It's time to go. You should look inwardly. If you want to be happy, that's the first place you have to look. Take an assessment of yourself. Do you lack patience? Do you lack skills, lack boundaries? Often when we face these situations, it comes from a desire to repeat history. And again, we're trying to repeat the things that didn't work before. Why in the world would we want to do that? I don't know. So you got to change the routine up. So there are 3 steps. The first step is would be to take a look at yourself inwardly, an inventory of what your skills are, and beef up those skills if you need to. Secondly, set some boundaries. And thirdly, if you're spiraling down, decide to get out before the water gets too hot. Good words, difficult to do. Now, Moses couldn't see the signs. I don't know what I would do if I came to this one. I would have to stop in the middle of the road. Traffic would be going around me, honking their horn, and I would still be looking and seeing which number I was supposed to take, and then was that right or left or straight? I wouldn't know. Clearly, Jethro could see the signs, but Moses couldn't. Jethro came at just the right time for Moses, and often God does that. He sends us a deliverer. Not always the person you expected, not always the form or shape that you'd hoped for. We all need that someone to help us decide to restart, help us decide how and what to change. I really hope that each of you have that person, that someone that you can lean on. I would say if you don't, call me and I'll be that for you, but believe me, I have my own and I lean on them way too much. So one thing is for certain, humans can exist in a state of constant tiredness, depression, fear, and hopelessness. Have you ever been there? Have you ever been in a job where it was just more than you ever wanted and you stayed there far longer than you should? I left quite a few jobs. Some of them I didn't want to leave. Some of them the business went out. But the ones that I stayed, I've generally probably stayed there too long. It's just my tendency to kind of want to work on through things. But it did have an impact in those situations on my family, on my life. Every day, come home completely drained physically and mentally. Only you can decide when enough is enough. Sometimes it takes a special friend to tell you, I think enough is enough. And it's hard to hear sometimes. But we all need that. We need to find somebody who will shoot straight with us and give us clear answers. Now, I don't know your problems. I certainly have enough of my own. But here are some signs that enough may be enough. You could easily become bitter and resentful. You're forced to give so much of yourself, there's very little left for you. You become distant from your family. Eventually, you may become in such a state that you do not even recognize yourself. I believe that was the state that Moses was in. He didn't even have time to reflect on who he was. He was so busy dealing with all of the other problems around him. Sometimes enough is enough. That's it. Enough's enough, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.